He was surrounded by custody staff. He was surrounded by nursing staff. He was surrounded by other inmates. Basically told the sergeant, if you don't want to help me, I will help myself. Within 20 minutes of being key locked, he was gone. The sergeant that completely ignored him and completely shut him down, he ended up being promoted to lieutenant shortly thereafter. It only takes a few minutes, and then it was just chaos.
We were talking about the tendency to sort of bury the signal in the noise and how this sort of creates an environment for abusiveness and for corruption, contraband movement in and out, a drug enterprise that splits resources and attention and ultimately leads to a correctional staff that has dual loyalties towards protecting its inmates and staff and also running contraband, which leads to neglect of care, almost like a malicious indifference to the lives and to the health and safety of the inmates, and a failure to sort of perform basic human decency and professional obligation to monitor people who are on suicide watch and to take their health and mental health seriously.
Both of us have background in working in correctional environments, and we have had the opportunity to kind of sit back and watch correctional staff, whether it's administrative staff or officers, case management, and there's just a lot of systemic pressure that comes down on them as to which direction they want to go. So if they want to be decent human beings, that's it's limited in how much they can do with that. I think that's one of the saddest things that I saw, because there are good people working in that system, but they're not allowed to be as good as they are, because then it's impeding on the system that's in place. Everything that's under wraps, everything that's undercover, the contraband, the drugs, the abuse, and that's where we come and we get to the suicidal end of things. The communication with the inmates is never very thorough. It's never. I remember so many times just talking to some of the inmates and them complaining that they were told things that were going to happen and things never happened. They were promised things that they were going to get and they never got them. And we're talking about the most basic hygiene products, clothes. They all have their tablets that they communicate with their families on. They don't, their tablets break, and they can get them fixed and they can, get them repaired, but their tablets are gone for months. They're not talking to their families. I know that when I was at ISP, they changed the policy on, they used to get 2 free phone calls a week with their families, and then they cut that down to once a month. Those free phone calls are 5 minutes. So there's so much that comes into play that plays into the mental health. It's not just the drugs. It's not just, but it's all of these things that are happening all at one time that play into the mental health of not just the inmates, but of the staff as well. Because whatever they're dealing with, we are also having to deal with. 5 minutes is not a long conversation. No, and that's a lot of them. If they, if they're talking on one of the phones in the unit, I mean, if the phone works the entire time, they're lucky. And so, you may get a couple minutes of actual conversation out of that, and the rest of it is, so, they're being cut off from completely from the outside world, from where their support systems lie. And, I think that's the whole thing, is that we, everything that they're dealing with, we then deal with indirectly, because they're bringing it to us, and what am I supposed to do? I can't talk to my family. I can't get clothes. I can't get hygiene products. We're not even going to get into how bad the food is. So if you can't afford commissary, which the majority of them can't, they've got all of these things that they're up against. And so that's when we come down to the suicide rate. I think the last time we talked, we were getting into a few of those suicides that had happened. Yeah, just venturing into some of the more specific cases, but we wanted to lay down, I think, the framework and the context for which, these kinds of tragic deaths and neglectful care episodes do in fact occur. Oh, actually, that light's a little funky. Can you take a look at that real quick?
The one behind you. Yeah, that one. No, that one. Yeah, see if you can.
What do you want to do with it?
Nothing.
Oh, you're an idiot. Eric thinks he's cute. It's not those kind of lights, weirdo. Last time we talked about my irrational fear of blue Christmas lights.
What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. This is my new jewelry.
He thinks he's cute.
It's new jewelry.
That is kind of cute, though.
What?
You're the most obnoxious.
That slows it down a little bit. Is this distracting?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For sure.
What's wrong with these lovely? I just happen to like the color blue.
Yeah, blue's my favorite color. That's a lot of it for no reason whatsoever.
So we were just starting to talk about some of the specifics, right? And there's a lot of deaths. I mean, I think Christine's article does a really good job in the Indianapolis Star, talking about your experience and how ISP accounts for a significant number of deaths in the Indiana DOC that really can't be accounted for just by normal distribution.
Right.
Like it's not. It's an outlier.
Yes.
Like it is a statistically significant amount of people who are passing away in that prison as opposed to other prisons.
Mm-hmm. Well, and 100% of the deaths that happened by suicide, substances were present in the systems of those who passed. And so, you can't, they think they can, but they can't point fingers in one direction saying, you're the reason, they're the reason, whatever, when there are so many factors that come into play. Christine did a phenomenal job of covering, all those factors that come into play. But at the end of the day, our department kind of took the hit for that. So we also got our hands on the mortality data going back to 2019, all the way up through, I believe, April of this year, going through all of that data and finding out that the average age of death, just not suicides, but just the average age of death throughout the entire Indiana Department of Corrections was mid-40s. That does not make any sense.
Right. So is there a particular case that you wanted to focus on? What was
I think it would be easiest to focus on those that were talked about in the article. One of which was Louis Vela, because his stands out as pretty significant because he was surrounded by people when it happened. He was surrounded by custody staff. He was surrounded by nursing staff. He was surrounded by other inmates. He was, mental health staff had been checking in with him frequently throughout the day because he was, in distress. We would go down, we would talk to him, de-escalate, try and get him to calm down. We would be contacted by custody staff. He's getting upset. He had been, banging his head against the wall, and he had been, and so, like I said, frequently we were going down there to check on him. So custody staff was present. They could see him through a window, a big window. He had a suicide watch companion, which, again, if we didn't explain before, is another inmate who goes through training to be a suicide companion. So those who are on suicide watch are being watched in 4-hour shifts by other inmates that have been trained to document every 15 minutes. Custody staff also is supposed to be documenting every 15 minutes what's going on. So if he's upset, if staff is coming in and talking to him, if medical's going in and talking to him, if they're doing anything at all, that should have been documented in the log for both the companion and custody staff. Do I know if it was or not? I have no idea. I know that I went down there, and this was a very, very busy day. This was, there was the afternoon, it was a very busy time of day. There were people in and out of the nurse's station, which was 10 feet from where he was, just constant traffic. And we had been getting calls about him from custody, like I said before. There was a signal called, a signal 3000, which is a medical emergency. But we hear those all the time. We hear them on our radio. They have an alarm that goes off when the signal 3000 is going on. And so we hear them all the time. We don't immediately run. We're mental health staff. It wasn't until somebody came and told me that it was Lewis that they called the signal on. And by the time I got down there, they had already gotten him out of the cell, onto a gurney, out of the building, down the street and around the corner and down another street to get to custody hall before we even realized that it was him. And he was already gone. He had a suicide blanket or they have a suicide smock that he was wearing. And he had taken that apart and used one of the strings to tie around his neck and hung himself and was gone by the time a staff member, not custody related, not mental health, not medical, not
the suicide companion.
Not the suicide companion who I had witnessed walking up and down and kind of pacing in the hallway because he was tired of sitting.
It was a nurse walking by, right?
It was, no, it was more like administrative staff. It was more on the administrative side of things and had mentioned to custody staff, hey, he doesn't look very good. You might want to check on him. And he was already gone. It only takes a few minutes.
Which is why a person is on suicide watch.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And so he was already gone by the time they took him out. And then it was just chaos. It was just chaos. And the only one who really, got any kind of reprimand for that, or, the suicide companion was terminated. Custody staff.
The inmate who's trained to be the suicide companion is the only one who received any kind of disciplinary action or punishment.
Yes, he was terminated.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Which just means he now has no job, no opportunity to leave a cell, basically, right? And so the actual staff, they get...
Who are... Yeah. So, and that was, at that time, I was not solely responsible for training the suicide companion staff or suicide companion classes. So they had biannual training. Our department would take turns going and doing the training classes. And then I took it over. I think after Lewis's death, I believe I was the one a few months later that took it over, like the next training round, I will do all the training. I love doing training. I love getting to know the guys. I like that I know their faces, and we're constantly interacting with them. It just helps me understand, and just creates a better relationship with them. But at that time I did not know this man. Yes, I saw him pacing, but this is where a lot of the issues happen, is that the officers would utilize the suicide watch companions as their babysitters. I don't have to watch him because he has a companion.
Right. When the whole purpose of it is that there's an overlap of two people, right? The
truth of the matter is there is never a time in any part of the day or evening that custody staff is on shift that they are not responsible for all inmates, including the person on suicide watch, including the suicide watch companion. You are now responsible for two people, not just this one. And so, because they are still inmates, you are responsible for both of them. But more times than not, we had certain, the higher up staff, like captains and lieutenants, that would, we don't have to worry about them. I need to get a suicide watch companion over there so I can cover I can cover my ass.
Right.
An inmate can't cover your ass. You still are responsible for both of these people. And so that was the confusion. So here we have this companion walking up and down the halls, and they have a staff sergeant in that building, and then they have an officer. And he was still able to complete with nobody noticing. He had been, and he wasn't standing, he was sitting, and just tied it around his neck, tied it to the bars, and then leaned forward. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes. And it just takes a couple minutes.
And so the person walking by, the administrative person, said, so she finds him leaning forward?
Yeah. She said he doesn't, because there's a huge picture window between the officer's desk and the holding cell room that he's in. So there's a huge window separating where the officers are, and she happened to walk by the officer's desk and was able to just glance. It was a quick glance into that holding cell and was able to say,
and you can see that he's tied to something that's holding him.
I don't think she could really see. She just said he didn't look good. He doesn't look very good. Somebody needs to check on him. And it wasn't until somebody got in there and really looked closer, because mind you, I think because he used a piece of thread.
Right.
So somebody who's just walking by kind of quickly and looking.
Right.
But I think she noticed his coloring was not good.
Well.
Yeah.
Dead.
Yeah.
One tends not to look good when they're dead. Yeah.
And she said, he doesn't look good. Somebody needs to check on him.
And so somebody just walking by and just having a passive glance was able to detect that.
Yes.
But the officer who's stationed there to do the suicide watch and the suicide companion, who he was also supervising and supposed to make sure that the suicide companion was doing their job, it all failed. In part because the staff who's supposed to be supervising that failed to do their job.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, the question then becomes like, well, what are you doing then?
Well, I mean, so many things come into play. Are you short-staffed? There's never a time they're not short-staffed. If you're too busy, which again, it was a very busy day. I know that our department was kind of, chaotic that day because, our department head was not there. I was the one who was placed in charge of the department, or I was the go-to for, I was the person, if you have questions, if you need anything, whatever, I was the go-to. I thought it was so interesting because once he was gone, then I was getting all the phone calls. Then I was getting all the, it was this crazy, I'm like, now you guys are blowing up my phone and but when it was happening and when he was, sat down on the floor and he got very quiet. And so it's kind of what they hope for. If he just sits and he's quiet, we can breathe for a little bit.
So that was one of the first deaths that you experienced when you were there. Was there another one that stands out?
The other one that really, I will never, as many times as I just by myself have tried to process, we tried to process it as a department, as a team. Just, we had meetings about, every time somebody passes, we have to have a meeting, with medical staff and admin and downstate and DOC. And as many times as we talked about it, it just still never made sense. And that was also, I believe Christine covered it in her article, was Mr. Conliff, who passed away. His head was in a bag of water that was tied around his neck. And I think they said it was he drowned. But there was and it was a suicide. Well, they passed it off as a suicide by drowning. But nothing about that makes sense.
I mean, your instinct would be to pull your head out of the bag of water.
Yes.
Yes. It's very hard to just stick your head and just leave it.
And not fight it. That is the human instinct to fight.
Yeah, the self-preservation instinct would almost certainly have led to multiple sort of, pulls away from the bag. It would have been a mess.
He was also, I believe he also, he tested positive for substances. The majority of them tested positive for meth, fentanyl. They K2 they still can't test for. But I know the majority of them were smoking K2, but I believe he had meth in his system. But after hearing from his family, or reading about the conversations that Christine had with his family, and he had been talking about coming home. He was excited about being released and starting his life again, and there was no warning signs, and there was really no that I'm aware of. There was no investigation that okay, how did this happen? How did this? And so he was not on our radar as somebody that we need to go and run. So that we had a lot of our guys that were kind of on our radar. If something's going on, we check in on them. They will contact us if something's going on and they're afraid. We're usually the first ones that they come to. If they're being threatened, if they're being extorted, which all happens, if they're being threatened by custody staff, if they're being denied stuff, mental health staff is the one is the department that they will go to. And so he had we hadn't had any contact with him in months. So our department got blamed solely for his death because we did not check on him 6 months prior when he did not attend a mental health session. They have the right to attend if they want to. If they don't want to, that's great. That is their right. And so, and then the rule is that if they miss consistently 3 times, then we will go check on them and be like, what's going on? That didn't happen with him. And so, we had talked to, we'd talk to each other and we'd talk to administrative staff and just, if we go and check on everybody who doesn't come to their appointments, that's what we will spend our time doing, because they will put in healthcare requests. They'll tell us they want to see us. They'll, they do. And then they decide they're having a better day and they're like, I don't need to, and so that's what they do. And so if we start chasing all of them around, why didn't you come? And so that had been the case with him. 5 months prior, he did not come to his mental health appointment. And because we did not go to his cell and say, hey, what's going on with you? We were blamed for a bag of water being over his head. I think we're so easily scapegoated, but it's not the case. You're not, what else happened? He was high. It's impossible to tie a bag of water around your own neck and just then.
Yeah. And they're making a very selective determination about proximate cause, right? Like, they absolve themselves of any sort of failure to due diligence and standard of care by just sort of ignoring what happened in the 5 months intervening the skipped mental health appointment and his actual death. And they just sort of go to the point of last contact with the contract workers providing mental health services and say, oops, you didn't follow up on this person who didn't show up for their appointment. Therefore, what happened 5 months later, it must be your fault.
Yeah.
And it just conveniently absolves.
It must have been this domino effect of mental health issues until it resulted in the way that it resulted.
And it absolves themselves of any responsibility for the intervening 5 months.
Yes.
So we don't know what level of neglect or abuse he may have experienced. We just go back to the last point of contact that you didn't have because you didn't show up for the appointment, right? Which would suggest that there wasn't an acute instance of sort of life-threatening mental health issues at that moment, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't take 5 months, right, in order for that to manifest. So, to say that you didn't treat that 5 month ago appointment with a sense of emergency, well, there was nothing to indicate that it was an emergency.
Correct.
So it's far more likely that stuff that happened in the intervening 5 months is likely the more proximate cause of his death, not the appointment he didn't show up for.
The warden himself called the family and said, he died, but that happens here. Guys here die all the time. So, which
is true.
But
it's true. But the question is not that they are dying, but why are they dying?
Why is my family member dead?
Right.
Explain to me. I want me, I feel terrible for these family members who, because they will never get the full truth of what's going on.
No, there's no incentive.
They will never get the full truth of what's going on. A lot of the guys, they talk to their families all the time. And they do confide in some of the stuff that's going on, but they will never hear the full truth. A lot of the guys hold back on it because they just don't want their families to worry. They don't want to tell their families what they're actually doing. And so there's just a plethora of reasons why they don't share everything. But according to his family, they were very clear on how he was doing. He was fine. He was good. He was talking and was upbeat and in good spirits and talking about coming home. And then they get this phone call, which so many families do. They get that phone call, 10 of them at least in 2025. I don't understand. I would be asking so many questions. I want the investigative report. I want to know what happened. I want camera footage. But I'm not in their position, to know what that would be like. So I can say what I would do, but I would never have any idea. And then us as staff, we're kind of at the mercy of whatever, and the only way that I can say it, whatever tantrum DOC decides to have that day, pointing fingers and blaming. But then when it comes to other cases, and he was not mentioned in the article, so I'm not going to give his name, but there was another individual who passed by suicide who had been asking for mental health for 2 days. 2 days straight of asking his unit sergeant, unit officers, other inmates. It was a weekend. It was a Saturday and Sunday. It was a weekend, so there's no unit team there. There's no case management. There's nobody there that he can go to in terms of that type of staff. But he was begging from his cell for, I need to talk to mental health. I need to go over to medical. And his unit was, they had to walk him, 100 feet. They didn't help him. They blamed it. Oh, he's high. Oh, he's pranking out. That was a big one that we heard all the time. Oh, he's pranking out. He's fine. He'll be okay.
What does that mean, pranking out?
He was high, and he's, they get kind of delusional, and they get kind of hyped up and anxious, and so he's pranking out. So he's, they'll start saying that they're seeing things in their cell, or they're hearing things, or whatever it is. The unit sergeant, instead of, again, it was a very easy, like, all right, cuff up, I'll take you over to medical, because the whole system is put in place. If he gets walked over to medical and says, I'm not okay, I'm going to hurt myself if I don't, I need to talk to mental health, which is what he had been saying, medical has to call us and say, he's saying he's suicidal. He said he's going to do this. He's got a plan. He's got intent. He's got, whatever. He tested positive for whatever substances. And for us, it's a very easy, put him on watch, we'll see him on Monday. It's a very easy fix. And to us, it doesn't matter what's going on in the unit. It doesn't matter if he's, at that point on the phone when they call us. It doesn't matter. Put him on watch.
And when you would put someone on watch, would you get blowback from the custody staff, like not wanting to do it, or?
Yes, when we were on site, yes, Monday through Friday, yes, we would. I would get calls from units. Oh, he's threatening this, he's threatening that. And so, can you come talk to him? That was a big one. Can you come talk to him? Well, protocol is, if they even mention the word suicide or I'm going to kill myself or whatever, it's immediate cuff up. It's an immediate stop. Everything else is put to the side and they get walked to our building. And so they can be assessed and we can decide then if they need to be put on watch or not. Custody staff didn't want to do that. Oh, we've got other stuff going on. I don't have time for this. Can you just come talk to him? And so the reliance on our staff to then, we have to get up, we have to leave our building, we have to go to another building, because all of, this is it's like a college campus. We're walking to different buildings to go do everything. Periodically, we would do it. But protocol says they have to be brought over to medical building. He was never brought to medical that weekend. And in fact, it was the unit sergeant's decision to then key lock him, which means he locked him in a cell. So he couldn't come out.
What strikes me as odd is that sort of institutional resistance. Like, I remember putting people on suicide watch at the RDC. Like, it was never a problem.
Yeah.
It just wasn't.
It was always a problem. It just always seemed to be, such a big issue.
But see, that's the thing. Like, if you're operating already as a maximum security prison, you're already scrutinizing all their movement and all their behavior anyway at a very high level.
Yes.
Right? So additional scrutiny, honestly, isn't that hard.
Yeah, if the scrutinizing is actually taking place.
Right.
If they're actually doing their job.
And this is my point. Like, the reason it's such a difficulty is because it's a substandard level of scrutinizing movement and behavior. And my suspicion is that it's because they are focused on other things, illicit things, right? Whether it's the movement of drugs and money, and so they're basically working two different jobs at the same time. And they don't.
And it was known that custody staff, not just custody staff, other contract staff, other contract departments, they had no understanding and they had no respect for what we do as a department. And so it just, like, to have to call us and to have to deal with us and the funny thing is like, once you call us, we take over, you're done. You don't need to do anything. Just, get out of our way and let us do our thing. That's all they had to do was we just need them in front of us and you can go.
What you described in the past was this sort of enclaving of the professional staff. So it really wasn't like a professional team that was working to sort of manage the days and the lives of the inmates. It was almost like cliques. Like, you had medical, you have custody staff, and it's not a cooperative environment. It's almost competitive and hostile, and it just doesn't lead to a sense of a full-bodied staff working in the same direction, right?
Right.
there's almost like this game of sort of blame attribution. Like, we don't want it in our department, so we're going to shift it onto yours. And it just kind of leaves you're already outnumbered as a staff compared to the inmates. So to further bifurcate into smaller groups, right? And to say, now we're also against you as well. I mean, your department was how many people?
At the end of 2025, it was, I think there were 6 of us, 6 or 7 of us.
And that tracks with my experience of working at RDC. We had 3 psychologists, and then we had 3 or 4 other sort of master's level clinicians. So yeah, it was about 6 or 7, right? But the thing that strikes me about your experience as opposed to mine was that the relationship with custody and with classification and with, we also had people doing contract work who did the sexual offender sort of stuff. It was all very cooperative. Like, medical was, always on board. They were always very helpful. Like, it wasn't just sort of like, it's just the 6 of you, right? Yeah. It was the 100 or so of us trying to manage the days and the lives of the inmates that were there, right? Yes, there were some interpersonal conflicts, but overall, I just felt like it was a radically different experience than what you had. But both are technically maximum security prisons, but they're not operating remotely the same.
No. And I can, because I have, experience at other correctional facilities, I can tell you without a doubt, it was not operating anywhere near the same way, and I think I had mentioned in the first half that we had people that would come in, we had new hires that would come in, and, we have to be with them until they get badged, until they get all of their credentials and all of their stuff put together and everything worked out. After they, go through training, they have to shadow us. We have to be with them if they go anywhere in the facility. So we had a lot of opportunity to walk with them. Let me back up for just a second. The individual that I was talking about, who ended up getting key locked in his cell, basically told the sergeant, if you don't want to help me, I will help myself. He did end up hanging himself. Within 20 minutes of being key locked, he was gone. And that was all based on all they had to do was walk him across the street. And we never got a call about him. We never had any concern stated about him. But we did have an opportunity to walk the range and hear all of the other inmates on that range tell the exact same story.
To be clear, it's not necessarily across the street. That's not like you have to leave the prison facility and cross the street and go to another.
No, it's literally...
It's all one campus.
Yes.
It's just that there are separate buildings.
They walk out of their door and they walk across and it's... Yeah. And I'm telling you,
these are walkways, pathways
yes.
that move from one building to the next. And so, even if you're traveling from one building to the next, you're still within the confines and the property of the prison system, right? So it's not even that far, really.
No, it's a matter, like I said, he gets walked 100 feet from his cell, cuff him up, walk him out the door. He wasn't even, on a high range where they have to walk him down multiple. Even if they did, it does not matter. He's not walking down multiple flights of stairs. It's just literally pull him out of his cell, walk him out the door, and walk over to our building.
Indiana Boys School is very same. It's separate buildings, but it's now Indiana or Plainfield Reentry Facility, but it's the same architecture. It's separate buildings that you have to sort of move to in order to access certain programming and seek certain services. But then you go back to your base unit, which is its own little building. So some of the correctional environments are structured in that way. RDC, for instance, was monolithic in one space. Pendleton Juvenile also has separate buildings. So yeah, it just kind of depends. It depends on the structure, basically. Some prisons have multiple, buildings. Others are just one construct, but it's all just one prison environment.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
So like moving him across the street, outside of would have been a whole different task. Would have been much more complex. Yeah. Right. But that's not this at all. It's just moving one building to the next.
It's just going for a walk.
Right.
That's all it is. It's just going for a walk, and they didn't want to do that. And the sergeant that completely ignored him and completely shut him down, and he ended up being promoted to lieutenant shortly thereafter. So if you're asking if these guys ever pay any consequences, I not when I was there. I never saw, and I saw many cases of many different types of like, inmate neglect, inmate abuse, and then staff harassment, staff assault, staff, like all of these different things, staff on inmate. Nobody ever paid any consequences. And so it just, myself included, I had to go to HR and had to go through a 3-month investigation because I reported a sergeant for harassment, sexual harassment, and then went through continued harassment after that for months and months and months, was blackballed by custody staff because, I reported one of their guys for misbehaving.
You're blackballed by custody staff. That means what practically on the
well, we have to, we have to have a lot of interaction with custody staff to get our job done, especially over in our seg unit. And so we can't, our seg guys, when I first started working there, our seg guys were brought over to our building so they could come to their sessions. They were brought over, they were cuffed. They had to be cuffed while they were in session because they're from our seg unit. That's fine, whatever. But then they didn't have the staff that they needed to escort them over. So we ended, like the majority of our sessions with them had to take place in the seg unit. So we had to have the officers take them out of their cells. We would do our rounds. This person, however many people want to come out and talk to us in an office that was, set aside for us to see them. And they wouldn't pull them out of their cells for us. Well, for me. And so each of us had our one day that we would go over to seg, and I knew on my day that I was not going to get to see any of the patients I needed to see. They were not going to pull them out for me. Oh, can't you come back another day? Oh, well, yeah, but we're doing showers today.
Right.
But we're doing rec today. We can't, can't you just do something else? Can't you just, and
but that's the thing. Like, isn't rec and showers are every day, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's, yeah. So it's not at ISP. It's not. And so
it's like saying we're doing food today. Like,
yeah, we're going to feed them today. And so you can't, you're really infringing on our food time. And so, I would follow my chain and I would go to my supervisor and our department head and say, hey, I'm having trouble again. They won't pull them out for me. She would talk to them. She would talk to the unit sergeant and say, hey, she needs to see, all you have to do is pull them out of their cells. She needs to see her guys. Oh, yeah, we'll get them for her. Just, what? And so we would give them the list of names to have them pulled out. And then I would stand there for another hour waiting for them to be pulled out. They're still not getting pulled out. The longest time that I sat over there was like 2 hours and 45 minutes. I just sat there just waiting. And at that particular day, we had gone to the unit sergeant, we had gone to the unit lieutenant, we had gone to the major, and then finally worked our way up to the captain, the shift captain, and our captain, and then worked our way up to the major. We need these guys pulled out. Major would call over there and scream at them to get them pulled out. And there was one time that Major called over there and yelled at them to pull him out, and they actually pulled him out. Every other time they ignored him. Right.
So when you're blackballed and you have an entire custody staff that's, basically passively aggressively and preventing you from doing your job, right? It sort of undercuts the argument that somehow the mental health staff failed to do their job, thus causing the suicides. Like, how are you supposed to do your job when the custody staff won't facilitate the movement of the inmates in order to be assessed?
And that was my whole, if I just continued talking, I just continued interacting with them. I continued making sure, that I was, the day that I was over there for 2 hours and 45 minutes, I stood right in front of the main camera to make sure. So I'm just sitting here, and I was sitting right next to the door where they're walking guys in and out, so they can be seen going up to the ranges and pulling guys out for rec or whatever, but they're not pulling them out for me. So they can be seen, sergeants, lieutenants, all of these guys being walked out the door that I'm standing next to, but they're not pulling my guys out to be seen for mental health. And so I made sure that I was interacting and hey, can I, and I remember on that day, I remember the lieutenant for that unit, he was giving a tour to potential new hires. And he came in, and that's where I was standing. He's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm waiting for my patients to be pulled. And he's like, it's rec and shower day. These new hires are just like, they're like, and I said, yeah. I said, that doesn't really have anything to do with mental health. I said, this is the day. Yeah, can't you come on another day?
Shower day.
It's rec and shower day. And I'm like, I said, no. I said, I'm here at the same time every week. And so he's trying to put on a cute little show in front of the new hires. And I was not going to let him have it. I was so done, but that's kind of the thing. And what we were talking about earlier, our new hires, when, we have to walk around the facility with them because they don't have badges. They don't have the ability to get in places, keys, whatever. And there was never not a time where the comment was, why are there so many inmates just out walking everywhere? Unless there's a signal called. And even then we got to the point where even when there was a signal called, all the streets are to be shut down. Everything's supposed to be locked. Inmates are not to be out on the streets when signals are called. Inmates are walking to chow. They're just kind of out in the streets, just doing their thing. We're yelling at them to be, where are you supposed to be? There's a signal going on. Oh,
yeah.
We're going to chow. They're walking freely. And there is no...
That's very unusual for a maximum security prison.
Yes. And there's no custody staff anywhere. So we're calling, hey, you've got guys out here and we've got checkpoints that are out, supposed to be out on the street, making sure that nobody's walking by, and the checkpoints are gone. I mean, we know where the checkpoints are, but...
Part of that blackballing process, was there ever a moment when you're, walking the cell block and, checking on people, and you have an inmate that's becoming aggressive or hostile, and there's no sort of custodial staff to back you up? Did you ever feel like you were in danger because they were sort of neglecting
I never
you?
felt like I was in danger. So that's one thing that I can say that I'm very, very grateful for. And I don't know if it was just luck. I don't know if it was just the relationship that I had with the inmate. I don't know what it was, but I never felt like I was in danger. But I do feel like there were times, and it didn't just happen to me, but there were times where my patients were in danger. I walked up to my one patient's cell, and he was known for self-harm. And I had walked up to his cell to go see him for rounds, and he was bloody blood was dripping. He was standing in a pool of blood. I was like, okay, he's standing. So I'm like, but he didn't look well. And I couldn't figure out where the blood was coming from. And so I had my radio. And so I started calling a signal, or I think I signal 8 just to have somebody coming up, because he was standing, he wasn't passed out, he wasn't on the floor, and so I'm like, I'm going to just have an officer come up so he can be pulled out and just taken to medical, because he was talking to me, he was standing, he looked okay so far. So I called for a signal 8, which means some officer is supposed to come up to that range immediately and see what you need.
Didn't happen.
Didn't happen. Part of that was on me. So when you go over, our radios obviously have channels, and when you go over to our seg unit, you have to change to a different channel. I didn't change to the channel. However, the main channel that I was on, everybody can hear me asking. If I hear somebody and they're on the wrong channel, I'm gonna radio through and be like, hey, switch your channel so the unit can hear you. Somebody radioed back and said, ma'am, you're, and this was several minutes later, ma'am, you are on the wrong channel. And I'm like, but you can still hear me. Somebody needs to come here. I've got a guy bleeding everywhere. And so I don't know how long I was standing there. I have no idea how long I was standing there. And another one of my colleagues from the mental health department had experienced the same thing. I don't remember, and I'm hoping that at some point she will come talk to us and kind of share her experience. But the unit sergeant was on the range with her, maybe 5, 6, 7 cells down, and she had a guy that was, I want to say he was self-harming. He was doing something, but she was panicked. And this was a thing. She's like, okay, the unit sergeant's right there. He can come and open the cell, get him out, and we can take him to medical. So she was screaming at the unit sergeant, who was just, feet away from her. And he's like, yeah, hold on. I'll be right there. But she was yelling, screaming, and he had no interest in coming to help her. And to this day, I have never seen her so frustrated, so upset, so angry, so just kind of just stupefied at the response, and that there was none.
And it can be profoundly isolating and demoralizing to realize, should there be a dangerous situation, they may not have your back.
Correct. Yeah, I went through that fear, and it took me a while to kind of figure that out when I was, because the person that I reported for the harassment was still actively harassing me. I was told that if he continued to harass me, to report it to the state, and I did, and was met with silence every single time. And the investigation came out what was supposed to be a very quick, maybe a week-long investigation ended up being 3 months. I think they interviewed, 20 plus people, all saying that they had heard or witnessed or something. And they said that my claim was unfounded, and that this correctional sergeant cried during his interview. I also cried while I was reporting him, but that didn't. So, yeah, but he cried during the interview, and so therefore, the state called and checked on him every day to make sure that he was okay.
Kind of them. Yeah.
And so it was unfounded, and they said that I would never get a copy of the report. I would, the investigative report, the findings. They took down all of the interviews, what everybody said, all of the statements, everything, and that I was told, the governor himself could request that paperwork and he would never get it. It's confidential. We don't give it to anybody. And it was put right in my hands.
I'm not sure how the governor would feel about hearing that.
Oh, no.
That if he wants to get a report about harassment in his DOC, he's not allowed to receive it. That's very interesting.
But it was put right in my hands by the warden secretary. She's like, you might want to take this and go put it in your car. And I took it and went right to my office with it, and I've had it ever since. So I was able to see all of the statements and all of the input by the investigators and investigators.
Is the warden secretary still there?
She's not.
Yeah. Okay. She left on her own, right?
She did.
Yeah. Okay.